But I would like to welcome our next keynote speaker, who is the last keynote speaker for our opening session, Dr. Ahmet Aysan, Professor and Program Coordinator of Islamic Finance and Economy at Hamad bin Khalifa University in Qatar, part of Qatar Foundation. Indeed, this is the first time IBA CIF is also partnering with Hamad bin Khalifa University for organizing this wonderful conference. So I welcome you, Doctor. He's a very experienced academician, as well as remained a consultant for a number of central banks and multilateral institutions. Over to you.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much again for the kind invitation and kind introduction. It is great to be part of this conference. We are a bit short in time. Let me start very quickly. I greatly learned in the last 2 days, especially on the Pakistani Islamic financial market, also on IFE standards. So they were great informative sessions also. In my speech, I would like to discuss about some global developments because at the end, one way or other, whether we like it or not, but even the Islamic finance industry is very much related with the global developments. And considering the momentum after 2008 global crisis in Islamic finance, it is quite self-evident. That's why let me turn your attention to some of the global development and let's think about how they might affect the Islamic financial markets. First of all, globally, it is relatively a difficult time. We observe rising interest rates globally. Even though Islamic financial markets are more developed than 20 years ago or just after the global crisis, still we are quite not immune to global developments at all, because these are aggregate changes, and it is very likely to affect Islamic financial markets. For example, for the rising inflation comes sooner or later with the rising interest rates, and it is going to affect the Islamic financial markets. Even consider Pakistani's Islamic financial markets. Apparently, there are many international investors investing in the financial markets, and they are going to be very much concerned about their returns when the Federal Reserve start increasing the interest rates. And most of those global investors are anyway investing in UK, US sort of bigger markets, and the returns there will be higher. And what will be the effect for the Islamic financial institutions in the developing countries, how much they are going to invest, and what will be their expectations. This is one way or another, again, a concern. I mean, we can have some within discussions, what should be the rules, regulations, and so on, but this is an aggregate shock for the overall financial market, but particularly for the Islamic financial industry. There are also concerns about having bubbles. Imagine the last 4 or 5 months in the global stock markets, there's a decline in IT-related industries, and certainly it will affect the global capital inflows and even the way how people try to accumulate their savings. We haven't discussed much since yesterday, actually, but I believe it's the World Islamic Finance Forum, and these are the global trends, like cryptocurrencies. Where is it stands? It is not just enough to discuss whether it is Sharia compliant or not, but it is a factual that even the cryptocurrency market probably has a higher market share than global market share than the Islamic finance. And it just happened in the last 10 years or so. Not even in 10 years, in the last couple of years. And this is something of reality which Islamic finance people should focus more attention. Not just from whether it is a Sharia compliant or not, but as a social phenomena that most of the younger generation wanted to invest, and they wanted to invest not in a very conventional setups. These transactions are quite borderless. People invest in their local exchanges, but mostly they transfer their cryptocurrencies in bigger platforms like Binance International, and then they buy and sell all sorts of different cryptocurrencies. And certainly, we are still stuck with the Sharia compliance issues or Sharia issues about the Bitcoin, but this is a factual thing, and we should recognize this such that we will have a better approach for the younger generation. Also, globally, it is not a very favorable time, even for globalization. There is a tension between Ukraine and Russia, and it's a global tension, and financial restrictions, financial sanctions are heavily used, and it is a very important weapon for hegemonic powers, especially for US as a reserve currency, and US seem to be applying its hegemonic power in the financial markets. What will be the implications for the Islamic financial industry? This has to be something that we have to think about it by thinking of the examples of Ukraine and Russia and the resulting sanctions to Russia, financial sanctions related to this. And also, we are living in an environment which is relatively even more uncertain than the outset of the COVID-19. When the COVID-19 pandemic comes up, everything was pretty much certain, right? I mean, we didn't know about the pandemic, and we didn't know about this new virus much, but we for sure know that central banks will try to boost the economies, they will print more money, they will reduce the interest rate. And it's a very favorable environment for the financial sector. I mean, there should be all sorts of asset bubbles as a result of this, but it was quite predictable. You know that governments will be on your side, and then the economy will be booming. But what happens now? Now there's a high inflation rates, and inflation rates are unimaginable numbers, by the way. And imagine after 2008 crisis, all the countries were trying to generate inflation. They were pumping money, they're doing all sorts of fiscal redistribution schemes, but now they are trying to find a mechanism to reduce the inflation. We know the mechanism how to reduce the inflation. It is easy. I mean, it is all the macroeconomics throughout the years have taught us. But the problem is that there are social consequences. When you have 8%, 9% inflation, even within US, the politicians wanted to accuse Russians for inflating the energy prices. But the truth is, the root of this inflation is coming from some of the policy measures taken just after COVID-19 crisis, or even it goes back to the global financial crisis, because after 2008 crisis, globally we have loose monetary policies anyway. And then at the end, there are this sort of inflationary pressures. And this inflationary pressure can be solved quickly, but there is no political will, because there is a cost for it, and it will remain with us, not just in developing countries, because some developing countries have even much higher inflation rate, but globally, this inflation will remain with us for a while. There are all sorts of other issues, like global inequality, supply chain issues, which is, for some supply chain issues, relatively new, which was not expected. It's as if with technology we were solving all the problems, but apparently it is not that easy. And this is, again, related with the globalization debates, the relation between China and US and so on. These are really big uncertainties, and it is very likely to affect our countries and also the Islamic financial industry. I will not get into the sustainability ESG issues. I believe these are relatively big in the agenda, but all the other developments might even affect, for some global inflation concerns might even affect our discussions on the SDGs on sustainability. And certainly, all those things will have implications for the Islamic finance industry. But there is one key term that I would like to emphasize, which I believe Islamic finance institutions would be quite helpful. Resilience comes after this COVID-19 crisis. Many people are writing books about the resilience, and the central bank's main target was first the price stability, then with global financial crisis it becomes financial stability. Now the resilience. It is not just about the price stability, it is not just about the financial stability, but what if we have this sort of big global crisis? if we have a prolonged period of uncertainty, how can we sustain resilience? And I believe Islamic financial institutions might be even more resilient, and they can contribute. This is something that we might want to put into the agenda of the global financial system, because when Islamic finance first came out, it was more of a systemic challenge. I mean, we can do everything in an Islamic manner and we can change the world idea. But look what we are discussing now. We are discussing more micro details, right? I mean, in the last 2 days, this is good because it shows that at the beginning we didn't have any institutions, so we can make very big claims. And we can be very self-confident because there is something tangible. But once we start having Islamic financial institutions, banks, and so on, then we start getting into more micro details, which is good, again, because it shows that you are building institutions, but at the same time it is bad. If we forget some of the global ambitions that Islamic finance and economy was trying to bring out. And I believe this term of resilience might make us bring back to the old ideas and to say something for the global economy. And this is something unfortunate that I observed in the last couple of years. We had a very good opportunity of COVID-19 crisis, and we can say some of the Islamic perspectives to global world, because the global economy discussed about the minimum sustenance level of income, what should be the global economic quality, climate, all sorts of global issues that we can say something. But unfortunately, we seem to be too much focused on more micro issues, which is, again, good and bad. I believe we should remember this. And in the, is it moving? Can we move to the next slide, please? Where is it? Okay. I also discussed about some of the overall, the banking industry, financial markets are changing. There are lots of M&As happening, and this is mainly also from the technological changes for competition reasons. And we have to be also alert about this overall financial market restructuring. Okay. We have to be concerned about some of the challenges that fintech technologies are bringing. We have to be more concerned about the more global developments. And there is some attempt in the G20 led by Indonesia this year. But my overall conclusion is that it is fine to have new Islamic financial institutions. Even from yesterday, I mean, mashallah, Pakistan has done a lot on Islamic finance. The share of the sector has risen up to 14%, and it is expected to 19%, and it is expected to be even about 30% of the financial sector. Same thing is happening in other countries. I mean, Islamic financial institutions are growing. They are getting higher shares in the market. But one thing that we have to relate ourselves, there is a big aggregate changes are happening, global uncertainties, and more importantly, even fintech revolution. This fintech revolution is also an aggregate shock, and which is very likely to affect the Islamic financial institutions. Instead of the identity of Islamic identity, let's say, the younger generations are trying to relate themselves more with the technological changes. They are followers of certain cryptocurrencies. They are followers of certain crowdfunding companies. They are followers of certain smaller identity builders within the cryptocurrencies market or within the Reddit market. So we should be also aware of this developments in order to be connected with the Y generation, Z generation, with the new millennials, because they are the future customers. They are the ones who are going to build these Islamic financial institutions. They are the ones who are dealing with these cryptocurrencies, DeFi's, metaverse, and so on. I believe Islamic financial institutions should spend more time, not as a follower of fintech, but also the builder of the new financial environment, new financial architecture. Thank you very much.